announcements that we didn't end up getting to a point. Seems like yeah, seems good.
Hey. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Let's call this meeting to order. Thanks everyone for being with us. All right. The first item on our agenda is an update on the Community Engagement School Consolidation Feasibility Study.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Jeremy and I will be co-presenting this item. I'm Rachel Sawyer, and I will take you through the first few slides here. This is an update on the study related to consolidating school systems, specifically focused on the community engagement aspects that are kicking off this month. Background on the project, you'll recall, and I'll just refresh for anyone following along with the project who's not familiar. Back in September of 2023, our state of North Carolina mandated that our two school systems jointly study the feasibility of merging. And the following month, the school boards each voted to designate Buncombe County government as the lead entity for that study, and your board voted to accept that role. By November of 2023, we were off and running and had formed a local project team to help guide the study. Our first task was to hire the outside firm to conduct the study, and in March of 2024, Prismatic Services was selected as the vendor to conduct that study. And ultimately, the findings and recommendations are due back to the State General Assembly by February of 2025. We will talk more about how to get from the final report, which comes to us by the end of December, through the governing bodies for review and consideration and forwarding findings to the state at a later date. Today's focus is around the community engagement priority within the study. So that local project team expressed community engagement as a top priority within the study. They picked three things that they really wanted to see in the study: data, equity, and community engagement. On the data side, rigorous and comprehensive analysis of both quantitative and qualitative data, equity analysis throughout all elements, and community engagement as one of the three big priorities, specifically including not just public-wide community engagement, but also engagement with individuals that would be potentially impacted by a decision to merge or not merge, so that they can contribute to the study, and that their input shapes the findings and recommendations of the report. So quickly, before I pass to Jeremy, I'll describe the roles that our vendor is carrying out. So our contract with Prismatic Services requires that they collaborate with Buncombe County's CAPE, which is the Communications and Public Engagement Team, to co-create a strategic communications and engagement plan. And that was based on us knowing that our local CAPE team and the communication teams from the schools are the ones that are here in the community all year round and have relationships with the community and really want to be co-leading any community engagement efforts. The vendor is creating the engagement instruments and running them through that local project team for input. We're contributing on survey questions and things of that nature to ensure that the engagement that they're doing reflects the intent, that it's inclusive and comprehensive and unbiased, et cetera. So they are also hosting some sessions, which you'll hear about shortly, that are both in person and online. And they will be responsible for collecting everything that comes out of the engagement, analyzing it, using it to inform the findings and recommendations in the report, and reporting back to us about what they heard.
Thank you. So So in making the plan, there was a couple of things that we wanted to think about and some of the responsibilities that we had. And so first, Kate, we developed a plan with Prismatic. We worked very closely with both school systems, making sure that we were including the right audiences and looking at our engagement modalities. We also want to, some of our responsibilities is for all of the survey work and our virtual meeting. We're going to be housing that on public input. We also were responsible for working very closely with internal and external partners and thinking about all those sort of logistics. We wanted to make sure that in doing this work, and again, our scope of work was promoting those opportunities for input using diverse channels. And then lastly, we definitely want to make sure that we were working to increase access and make sure that all of our sort of engagement efforts were done with an equity lens and make sure accessibility was at the front. So looking at some of those objectives, again, as Rachel said, gathering an extensive amount of data to make sure, excuse me, to make sure that it informed our findings. We wanted to make sure that we included those diverse voices, so really making sure those communication channels and working with ACS and BCS, we were able to meet those individuals and really work with those underrepresented populations. And sorry, I don't have my glasses, so if you see me straining, I'm sorry about that. We also wanted to make sure throughout all of our work and working with Prismatic that this is an unbiased, neutral approach in everything that we're doing, because that's going to be really key. And then we wanted to make sure that through all of our efforts that we're running broader engagement in addition to some of the things that we're doing now. So right now we're doing focus groups. We have meetings coming up in September. We're sharing this information throughout the community as we speak. And so these are just some of the targeted groups and representatives that we identified in doing this work. So really working with ACS and BCS school staff and parents, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, higher education institutions, special interest group, local business groups and associations, neighborhood associations, and of course, sort of the broader general public. And so these are some of our engagement methods. So right now, as I said, we start our focus groups this week. We have between 50 and 100 organizations that we reached out to participate. There's going to be drop-in community meetings throughout the month of September. We're also going to have an opportunity for those to engage online. On public input, we'll have a community survey, and from a tactic standpoint, social media, earned media, our radio programming, email, and some of those boots on the ground engagement efforts. And so in terms of next steps, our public input page has already been developed, so the information about school consolidation meetings is there. We're going to continue to promote this widespread, continue advertising the ability to take those online surveys, and continue to work with ACS and BCS to make sure that we're doing all that we can from a planning and outreach standpoint. So last slide around project considerations. Again, project and process impact are two things that we really thought about when coming up with this plan. Again, we have a lot of engagement efforts, so we want to make sure that we were really targeted and strategic with making sure we're reaching out to those who would be the most affected. So we've been working really close with both school systems and Prismatic. We also want to make sure that being unbiased and neutral throughout all of our efforts was really at front and stage, because we didn't want to skew any outcomes. Engagement fatigue, we're countering that by really looking at succinct messaging to kind of cut through the noise, because we do have a lot of things happening right now. We work very closely with the school systems on conflicting events to make sure that the meeting times and dates didn't conflict with anything. And then lastly, we really want to make sure things like barriers with location, with language, I apologize, making sure we tackle those barriers. So right now we are working with a partner on about 7 different languages, so make sure interpretation and translation was available so everyone felt welcome at our meetings.
I'll quickly add.
Oh, sorry.
Another next step for commissioners to be aware of is that you'll be contacted by Prismatic Services and invited to participate in an interview. That's true of this governing body as well as the school boards for Asheville City and Buncombe County Schools. And that's in addition to the many dozens of interviews that have occurred and are continuing to occur with people who are closer to the topic and might have input, whether it's you all, of course, are coming from the governance perspective. They're talking with folks who have knowledge and information about finance, about facilities, about curriculum, about programs. So really running the gamut. This community engagement piece is just one portion of the overall study.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Two questions actually. Can you elaborate a bit on what's considered a special interest group? And then the slide about the potential to be most impacted by this decision, what group is that specifically referring to?
I'll take a stab at it and pass to Jeremy to fill in additional context. So an example of most impacted would be parents. So how do we make sure that we are engaging parents who are enrolled in either of the public school systems so that they have the opportunity to weigh in? Students, personnel who work within the system are examples of those most impacted. And then special interest groups, I would have to pull the slide back and see if it included, we talked about organizations that represent different sectors of the community, so business community, the community that supports higher education, so not in K-12, but related, early education, youth serving organizations, so nonprofits that might enroll and serve, educational partners that are outside of the school system, so charter schools, private schools, homeschools, anyone in the entire community having a chance to come to the table and share their voice.
Is it possible when you speak about those most impacted to be a bit more clear in who that is moving forward? This is great work. Don't take feedback in any other way. This is a lot of work, and I'm really grateful for it. But I do think as we move forward in this process, explaining who is considered most impacted would be really important.
For sure. It's a term that gets shared and might have connotations. If there's anything specifically that you want to make sure that we are including in that language, we're open to hearing what that is. And just to add examples of what they might be asked, to put a finer point on it, the question, like what would be in a survey, what would be asked in a focus group or in a community meeting, an example question that I think is a illustrative example is, what do you think the deciding factor should be when deciding whether to recommend schools merge or not merge? And so the questions like that will be asked. And because we are cataloging information about where the input comes from, we'll be able to see were there differences in different settings or populations in the kind of answers they gave.
I was going to ask that follow-up question is, would we see the data, or would it be presented in a way that we would know the youth serving organizations felt this way, the business community felt this way? Because I think that could be very telling.
That's the intent.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Could you remind us what the time frame is again for just kind of going through the process?
The overall timeframe of the active study, so when Prismatic is conducting their work, was April through December, so a 9-month period to do the study. So we're heading into the fall. They have done a lot of data gathering and analysis. The report creation will be completed by the end of December. So staff is working up a plan with feedback from commissioners and members of the school boards so that how can we make sure that you are prepared as much as possible during the months toward the end of that time frame in like November and December to be ready for what's coming in January, which is the formal presentation of that report by the vendor. We've talked about a potential opportunity for the 3 governing bodies to hear that presentation together. But there's a short amount of time between when we have that report in hand and when findings and recommendations are due to the state. So we're strategizing about what can we do in December or November to get you informed and equipped to be as ready as possible as of January.
Okay, and there's a legislative requirement to report out in January?
By February 15th.
By February 15th, okay. And so, I imagine there's going to be, it's a big, complex, important issue in the community, right? So there's going to be people who are like, I've always thought we should have one school system. There'll be people who would say, like, I love the 2 school systems. We should absolutely not mess up something that's not broken. There'll be all these perspectives, right? I think there'll probably also be a lot of people who, though, we say, like, when they're asked, are you supportive of the idea of having a unified single school system in Buncombe County? People will say, well, like, but what does that actually mean, right? So I guess my question is to, like, what extent, as you're engaging with community groups, is this going to be sort of explained?
Right.
Like, here's what that would look like, or here are, or there's actually a number of different models for what that could look like. So how are we gonna sort of like paint a picture of what the different possibilities would be of what a unified school system would actually look like and how it would operate?
That's a thoughtful question and a theme that we've been talking about. I don't know that I have one single answer that gets at that. An example is you heard the drop-in term used for the community meetings. So the way that those meetings are organized is that members of the public can stop by for 15 to 30 minutes and look and go to different stations where they interact or engage. And how do we make sure they feel informed enough to be able to answer any questions that might be asked of them? There's an information station that they come to first to do some of that level setting. In an online meeting that people are attending for a 2-hour period, there would be at the beginning some information sharing. In terms of specific models of what a unified system look like, that's not something that we have in hand yet because we don't have the results of the report yet. So I don't know that we're presenting what a model of a unified system necessarily would be, but explaining the two systems and the factors in context about staying separate versus becoming a unified system.
Okay, so I guess I would just say, and I'm sure it's often thought about before, but my comment would be, I hope that we also kind of really encourage people. I mean, again, some people might just say that, like, the two systems we have are fine, and I don't think it makes sense to go through this whole process to consider merging them. But but I hope we will invite people to say, to think about the question, if there were going to be a merger of the two systems, here's what would you want to see in it, or would you support it under certain circumstances, and what would be those things you would want to see if it did go down this path? Because there might be a lot of folks who will say, well, I might be open to it if, and then it's like what are those if things that people would want to see, I think is an important part of trying to hear that, as opposed to just, is it as a binary choice of like you support the status quo or a merger, right?
Yep, and as we refine what the survey questions will be, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. So we don't want a biased question that leads them to think, because we're saying, if there is a consolidation, what should it look like? Does that sound like maybe we're consolidation minded? So choosing the balance of questions and the wording of questions is definitely a science as well as an art. And we're inviting feedback, like what are some of the best things about your school system? What are some things that we would absolutely want to make sure get kept no matter what happens? So lots of ways at getting at the answers. And you're right, there's it's hard to share a personal opinion about whether someone thinks the school should merge without reading the report first. But this is information that public sentiment will help inform the report, along with all the other data and findings that they uncover.
Thank you. All right, other questions, comments? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be on the lookout for the community engagement sessions, and please share them with your networks.
All right, next up, the schedule of values. Keith Miller is going to help us out with this.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am Eric Krager, and myself will present this to you today. So I want to say a few things before Eric gets into the presentation or we start getting into the details of what this is. We did want to do this with you in this setting today to give you the opportunity that we could kind of work through it and answer your questions. If you have something you don't understand, then we'll take a few minutes to go to the book and look at that. But the schedule of values, which is quite a large document, and this time around for the 2025 reappraisal, the entire document was rewritten from front to back. So it is a new, fresh, clean document. What is this? I'll say a little bit about that and why do we have it. North Carolina General Statute requires we have it. Okay, it's not something that Buncombe County does. It is a requirement from the general statutes that we have this manual in place. So any resident could go to this manual and better understand on how their property is valued, why we use certain codes, and why we use certain descriptions. It would all be found in this manual. So I'm going to let Eric go through the presentation, and then later this afternoon at your regular meeting, I will also formally present the manual to you and ask you to set a formal public hearing for the manual. So there's a process that we had to go through, to work through over the next few months to get this adopted and in place. So please stop Eric as he goes through if you've got questions, and we'd be happy to talk a little more in detail.
All right, see if I can get this thing working here. All right, so why do we do the schedule of values? As Keith just said, we're required to by general statute. You know, it is, what I like to say, it's a guideline for our reappraisal for every 4 years. So everything we put into the schedule, we put into for a reason. If it's not in there, we shouldn't do it. So we use it internally to refer to if we have new neighborhoods, or we're just checking to see if we can make an adjustment on a parcel or a neighborhood. We refer back to the schedule of values to make sure that it can be done. And all those processes we have in place, and whether it's on the data side or it's in the field work or on the appraisal side of things, it's all guidelines set forth by the OWO and the North Carolina Department of Revenue. And you can see there looks like I have 2 IWO logos, but the other one is the Certificate of Excellence in Assessment Administration. Can't say that. We got that in 2021 after that reappraisal. And as of April of 2025, we will be attempting to get a renewal on that certification. So some improvements to this schedule of values as opposed to the previous one. Like Keith said, we had a technical writer come in and help us with the language in the schedule of values. She does not have an appraisal background, so that helped us streamline the book, the manual. Also, she updated with lots of graphics. It's a much better looking manual, new photos, things like that. So it's a more modern document for us. And also, I come from the data world, so I tend to focus on that. So we revamped our land valuation process. We have a internal data team. It's a small team, but actually they help every department of the assessment, but they specifically for reappraisal. They helped with revamping the process by, they're coders. They get into the details of the data, and they build a lot of dashboards that help inform us make quick, accurate assessment decisions on parcels and neighborhoods, buildings, things like that form the tables that drive the values for the schedule. So also you can see down here, it helps the schedule because it helps us grab more accurate data when we're doing analysis. We also updated our data collection techniques, got new processes in place. We actually strapped a camera to the top of a county car and drove around, took imagery. So things like that help us. They help us speed up the process and make more accurate decisions. So a big part about the schedule values, and everything we do is the 3 approaches to value. So it's the cost approach, the sales comparison approach, and the income approach. So cost approach, that's how much it should cost to build your house or building on January 1 of 2025. So what we do there is we use cost manuals, national cost manuals, and they have region factors on them. And we also take surveys of local, residential, and commercial contractors to fine-tune our numbers, our price per square foot, things like that, depending on the materials on the structure. So also, the most useful valuation for these types of properties, it's the ones that don't participate in the market very often. Like I say here, churches specialize in industrial and government buildings. They all have a market value assigned to them, but they don't participate in the market very often. So the cost approach is the most accurate assessment method there. Next, the sales comparison. I think this will look familiar for anyone here. It's if you've tried to purchase a home, you've seen a grid like this. This is actually available to you. I built this one off of our Comper application we have on our website. All the residents can go there when they file an appeal, or they can just go there now to just mess around with the Comper tool. So basically, in order to use a sales comparison approach, it's most useful for properties that participate in the market to try to pull comparable sales. So, you can see here, I got a subject property, and I've pulled 3 comparable properties to it. They're within the close vicinity to the structure, to the home. And, we make adjustments based on the market factors that we see when we do the sales comparison approach. So you have the cost approach, and then you use sales comparison to come up with market factors. And what that means is this first house here in South Asheville, the market's going to be different for that type of home in that type of neighborhood in North Asheville or in Montford or in different parts of the county. So you'd use a sales comparison approach to come up with factors for those. Income approach. So that's for income producing properties. For your apartments, your hotels, offices and warehouses. So income approach, its value is basically the amount an investor is willing to spend to get a return on their investment. And we come up with that by research, determining market capitalization rates, looking at manuals and publications, and we also survey local businesses and ask for information from them to help get a more local market value, or market rates, I should say. So the land valuation process. So in a couple slides here, I'm going to show you a grid for valuing a residential property, and then I'll show you one for valuing a commercial property. So I just want to show you this because it's part of the whole process. It's the first step, determine the land value. So determine the land value, you want to get a highest and best use, and you want to know what's allowed in that area, what's the zoning, what's the purpose. Is it going to be a residential subdivision, or is it going to be something else, a commercial property? And you'll also perform sales analysis to determine if these types of properties sold, what are they selling for, what's the rate per acre, where are they at, and it's going to help you inform the values of land rates in that area for that type of property. So it needs to be similar types of property. And size adjustment. I won't get too technical into the weeds here, but the size adjustment is basically, if you follow the chart, you can see what's happening on this one. So this is the rate per acre. You can see it increases as the lot gets smaller. So the rate per acre increases as the lot gets smaller, because that's what the sales market data is telling us it's happening. And market adjustments. So that's the final step in the land valuation process. So are similar types of land selling at the same rate per acre as the piece of land that you're subject? If so, what are they selling for, and what would the market adjustment need to be on that? Building evaluation goes back to the cost analysis, what your survey is telling you, what your market research telling you, what do you need to put on your internal tables that give you a price per square foot, and you're drilling into the sales analysis. You're checking to make sure you're seeing what's sold, and you're deducting the land value, so you're trying to make sure you're putting the right rate per square foot on these buildings as they're selling in the market. And then the size adjustment curve, just like land. You can see it here. Smaller the home, the higher rate per square foot, and the larger the home, the lower the rate per square foot. In the end, the value will be much larger over here, but that's what the market's telling us is happening. It's all based on market rates and market adjustments. Same methodology as land. You're kind of doing the same thing twice, just for different components of the parcel value. It all arrives to market adjusted cost. So you can see here, land, you got your base rate for your land, you're determining that for neighborhood of parcels. You have your market area multipliers for the land, and then you have your building costs, market area multipliers for the building, and that arrives at your market value for the parcels, neighborhood, the whole area. So here's the scenario I was talking about. This is your typical single family residential parcel. So to the left here, this is try to mimic the property record card we have on our website. So you can see here to the left, I have the pages for each one of these components on the schedule of values where you can actually look them up. You can do it now, or you could do that later. But this is typically what your record card would look like. And then you also have can't see that far, so I'm gonna look over here. You have your characteristics of your home. It's a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2,200 square foot. It's in that neighborhood, so SAOKFA. So you'll see that. That's a new thing we're doing for the land valuation process, and to group our parcels to similar neighborhoods and similar markets to help us make sure we're valuing comparable neighborhoods in the same manner. It's just, we've always done that. We've always attempted to do that. This is just a step up in that process to make it easier for us to make sure that we are doing so and that we don't have any errors there. So that's the code for that neighborhood, and SA stands for South Asheville. So and we remember Kevin Keene's analysis. So if you look at his analysis, there's the community areas. So we took that prefix for the parcels that lie in those areas and come up with the SA code. That's the South Asheville one. North Asheville would have an NA. West Asheville is WA. So, and then the second 4 letters there, that's going to be specific code for the neighborhood that they are in. There's a lot of those, and hopefully we're going to have a lot less of them. But that's part of the neighborhood delineation process we're going through as well. So this home is in a good condition. It's on a 0.44 acre parcel, and its land rate is at $200,000 per acre. That's not the land value, that's the land rate that it's on. And the market factors are 1.05 and 1.02. So in the schedule of values too, I don't have the page numbers here, but they're toward the end. All the neighborhoods, or market areas as they're called in there, are listed out with ranges of their factors and their values. So those are the guidelines that we stay in between in the future after reappraisal. And then also when we're done, when we land on what our final factors and values and rates and everything's going to be, we will publish those onto the data portal for people to see. So be upfront and transparent about what they have in their neighborhood on a rate level. Okay, so the next slide here. I've done the math ahead of time. So you can see beside each component what ends up being the cost. Number of kitchens, 1, 15,000 per, 15,000 on that, so on and so forth. And then at the end, you'll see the green there, that is the undepreciated and no quality adjustment done whatsoever flat value. So this is a B grade house in good condition, so it gets a 1.25 factor set to it, raises value to $419,248. Now, I didn't say this earlier and I should have, is the schedule of values, the rates, everything we do is built on an average normal condition home. Anything that deviates from that, high or low, gets a factor assigned to it based on what they're selling for. So, I think I'll add some of that. And then your construction quality gets assigned. Now, how old's the house? That plays into it. So the condition and the age, it's in good condition. It's 10 years old. And then it gets a 1.8% adjustment based on age. It depreciates. So that knocked it down about $7,500. And you can see over here, then you put for your building value, you assign your building market factor, and then you assign your land value after you calculated that, $200,000 per acre. 0.44 acres is 88, multiplied by 1.05, and there's your total value at the bottom. So that's a lot. I know it's a lot to take in.
Any questions on this proposal?
All right, now it's commercial time. So what we have here is a typical an income statement, and what I have here is an apartment building complex. It's 200 total units, 150 2-bedroom, 1-bath units, 50 3-bedroom, 2-bath units. Now those rents you see there, those are market rents. These are not, we don't go to every single apartment complex and ask them what their rents are for, things like that. We get a market rate, and we get that from our sources I talked about earlier. And we also get that from the survey data to make sure we are taking local information as well and incorporating that into our process here. So the market rents for this is $2,000 a month and $2,500 a month. You annualize it, and there's your potential gross income. Then you take out your vacancy and collection loss, the miscellaneous income, whatever they have on site, vending machines, stuff like that. You add that back into it to get your effective gross income. And vacancy and collection loss, all you see is market information. And then your typical operating expenses, and you get your net operating income. So you can see the triangle over here. It's the IRV method. On the top is your net operating income. You arrive to that. We have a market capitalization rate set. Again, market information collected by, research from all different types of market sources and our surveys. You take that, divide it, net operating income, divide it by the cap rate to get your value. And we build models for apartments, hotels, office complexes, warehouses, based on lease information and information like this. And we just apply it at the mass level. All different kinds of models for all different types of commercial properties.
And so on the apartment
Oh, sorry.
buildings, where did you say you're basing your income on local data?
Yes, typical local data that we're getting in surveys, and we're also incorporating that off of our market analysis, like from commercial publications. And we're also seeing that in, I didn't mention it, sales listings, things like that. Sometimes that information is out there. Oh, anything else? Any other questions? I'm jumping ahead. Good. All right. And another big piece of the schedule of values you'll see is the present use value section. So present use value is, all of our PUV programs that you hear about. It's agricultural, can't say any of these words, horticultural, forest land, and wildlife. So agriculture is what you think would be cattle, your poultry, tobacco, things like that. Horticulturals, vegetables, Christmas trees. Your forest land, if you're in production for doing commercial tree growth, it could be, as long as you meet the size requirements for there. Agricultural is 10 acres, horticultural is at least 5 acres, and forest is 20 acres. They have to be in production. And then wildlife, that's for conservation, hunting, and fishing. And all these guidelines, all these requirements, whether it's ownership requirements, production requirements, how much you're allowed to have, what's the maximum amount of acreage you can have in production, and receive this benefit is all in the schedule of values. You can go to it, see if you qualify. And then also, one thing too is we don't determine the breaks in these. We don't determine the land rates. The present use advisory board does. And they make suggestions and the rules, and the North Carolina Department of Revenue approves that, and we administer the program, but they set the rules that we have to follow to make sure people meet the requirements. So we have no control. They tell us the land rates, they tell us the values in order to create the deferred taxes for the property. So, any questions on that slide?
I'm just curious, so when they set those rates, are they setting those land rates based on the geographic regions of North Carolina, or are the land rates just the same across all of North Carolina?
Well, they actually do set them on geographic regions. So I think we're in the mountain region, and if I'm not mistaken, it's based on the soils types. So yes, it is. It's not just Buncombe County though, it's just the mountain region.
And then I've been getting this question, so.
Slipped, sorry.
Because this is state statute, and they're not changing it. It's staying the same that it has been, correct? Because for some reason, people get worried this time of year that it's being changed.
Keith just let me know, forestry is actually changing.
Forestry?
Yeah, not
So-
the other ones.
And so what's changing about forestry?
The actual rate per acre was going to change for forestry, but the ag, horticulture, the others are going to remain the same.
Okay, thank you.
When did we get that data that we can share with the public?
The data is in the book now. We received the latest data from the Use Value Advisory Board, so we include it in this manual.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So what's next? Here we are today. After this meeting, Keith's going to request a public hearing at the meeting upstairs. And then tomorrow, advertise, have our public hearing on the 20th. Adopt a schedule of values on September the 3rd. And the next day, we publish a notice of adoption for 4 consecutive weeks, which opens the appeal period. If someone wants to appeal the schedule of values, they can do so then, and then ends on October the 4th. That's all I got.
Any questions?
doesn't look like there are at this time. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Next up, strategic planning. Yeah, I think, is Raphael here? Got him listed, but who do we have? Help us
Good
out with this.
afternoon. I'm Heather Parkinson.
All right, great.
So coming back to you all today to talk about the 2030 strategic plan. Is everything good? Okay. So what I will do is recap the work that has taken place since June, when I met with you all at a briefing session and got your feedback. And I've taken that feedback to the focus area work groups, and I will be sharing the objectives and the SMART goals that they have developed. And I think it helps to kind of remind you all of this journey that we're on and where we have come from. So this all started in April, when we asked you all for your priorities. We took your priorities to the public and asked for their input as well as from staff. We then took that feedback to work groups within the county, and I met with you all in June, and we'd worked through fine-tuning language, priorities, objectives, goals, etc. We had a fun wall up, and my sticky wall, that I like to call it. And the work that has been taking place since then has been pretty extensive. So staff have been working in the focus area work groups on identifying the right goals to meet your priorities. And what will take place after today is I will take any feedback that you give us. We'll take it back to those development work groups, the focus area work groups. And we have the afternoon scheduled with you on the 22nd. And that will be a work session, hopefully fun and interactive, and we'll do some more fine tuning on this plan. So this is your plan. We're just trying to take what you give us, work with staff, bring it back to you, and see how this plan works out. All of that is leading us into November. The end of November, we will plan to have the final draft to you all for a vote. And so I mentioned the development work groups or focus area work groups that have been meeting. I think some of them have met multiple times each month through June and July. And we've brought in everyone that we can possibly think of to provide their feedback and input, their expertise. So a lot of work has been going on in the background. Additionally, you all had requested a survey out to the business community, and we had that survey. The feedback is in a packet that's been printed for you today, so you can look through that, as well as the workforce. So business and workforce survey, as well as boards and commissions. So county boards and commissions were invited to a virtual meeting, and we asked them for their feedback as well. So we've summarized that and put it in a packet for you. I will say, in reading through that feedback, I do not see anything that would change the course of what I'll present today, but if you see that differently at any point in time, please let me know. So I'll get into the fun meat of today. Because this isn't as interactive as the sessions have been to date, what I do have, or what you have in front of you, are some colored paddles, a green and a red. I thought it would be an easy way to maximize your time. And so I'll go through focus area by focus area, objective by objective, and stop and ask you all to give me a good sense of how you're feeling. So green is pretty self-explanatory. You're telling us to go ahead and go forth and continue to develop. Red is going to tell me that you want some edits made, or something's missing or needs to be removed. My colleague James will document anything that you think needs to be edited, removed, or changed. So without further ado, I'll start with growth and development. Growth and development has two objectives. The first objective is around encouraging diversity of housing as a foundation for affordable, healthy, and thriving communities, particularly for the most vulnerable residents. There are 5 goals within this objective. The first one is around the development of attached units. The second goal is around development around accessibility needs, meeting an aging population. The third goal is around preserving affordable housing through emergency home repairs. The fourth goal is around promoting affordable housing for households earning 30% of the AMI. And the fifth one is around increasing BIPOC homeownership. So I'll stop there and ask if you have any questions, any thoughts?
And can you just clarify on the first goal, when you say attached units specifically, can you give more information there?
My understanding around attached units is that it would be the development of apartments or attached units. Raphael?
Essentially anything but a single family, so it's going to be townhomes, condos, apartments, duplexes, triplexes, and such.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
On the fourth one, on the LIHTC household new construction, it says X%, but you said 30%? So I'm sorry, has that the number that's been decided, or were you just like using that as an example?
Good question. I think that's where we're leaning. I meant to leave out all of what I'm calling targets, like all of those numbers, so that we can just kind of focus. But the thought is to focus on the lower AMI to try to capture those that really need affordable housing.
Yeah. So I would encourage you to use 2 numbers there. I think, I mean, in part because we actually have like a very specific goal in this regard. So I'd say like just fill it in. Like we've already done all this work on it. So like we've got a specific goal in terms of new construction of affordable rental units by 2030. That need to average. I think the numbers I think are great are like that they need to average 60% AMI or below, and then there's a specific number that needs to be at a 30% AMI or below. I really like having both because there's a huge swath of the community that like getting like new units built that are affordable to people who make 60% of AMI like is huge, right? And then there is this need for like some significant number of units that are even more affordable. So I just think there's been good thought put into that. So I'd encourage you to just use both numbers.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And we just updated them at our Affordable Housing Committee meeting today. So, and we're raising the bar, so they're great.
So with those comments and edits, sorry.
And sorry, Brady, you're saying just to kind of expand that bullet to include both of those truths or goals.
Yeah,
right?
that's like
'cause
we're
right
going to
now it
build
doesn't
this
say
many
that.
new units
Yeah.
with an average affordability of 60% AMI or less, and with a specific goal of this number at 30% AMI or less.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's helpful. That was, I inserted that number, which started the conversation, so it's perfectly fine. So, as you're digesting it, how are you all feeling? Green on this one, or red? It helps to keep you awake too.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to move us forward then. We do have quite a lot of content, and just stop me at any point along the way. So the second objective is to maximize the use of land, guiding development to targeted growth areas that lead to resilient communities. So 4 goals here. First goal is around development in the growth areas as defined in the comprehensive plan. So those have been defined. Second is to increase subdivisions utilizing alternative designs and conservation techniques. Third is to complete greenway projects. Fourth is to break ground on affordable housing developments on county-owned properties. Thoughts here?
You know, the only comment I would have on this in terms of like if you're just like someone who's not like going to all the meetings, right? You're just reading this and trying to understand like what does this mean, right? Because most people like on the fourth one, like the number of greenway projects currently in progress, like most people don't know what that is, right? So I just wonder if it might be clearer to say like complete X miles or some other metric of greenways by 2030, because then it would just be like people would be like, all right, 5 miles. You don't have to know the whole backstory on like what the Greenways program is to know what
Yeah.
we're trying to do. So I don't know. That'd be one. Just
It will likely be that specific
okay.
once we bring numbers.
Yeah.
So I like number 1. It's using every word possible to avoid using the word density, which is fine. But does it need to be, I guess, do we need to have a specific percentage quantity per fiscal year? Like, do we really need to tie ourselves to that sort of like annual specificity? I don't know if that's a question for me, or I don't know who that question's for, but
You're saying on the first goal,
yeah,
But we do want some measures,
to like, no, yeah.
but instead of fiscal year, you want it to just be that 5-year period.
I guess to put it another way, I like the goal. It doesn't seem like the kind of goal that the staff would want to hold themselves to. Let me say it that way.
got it.
Right? I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so that
It's very
one,
specific. You know, it's exactly what we should do. It's like the number 1 thing I care about, but it's very specific.
so potentially set that one to a broader timeframe. Any other questions? Feeling good to move forward? Okay. So the next focus area is around economic development. This one has 3 objectives. First objective is to increase opportunities and support local workforce. So 3 goals here. First goal is around increasing economic development investment program projects that include healthcare and benefits. Second goal is around increasing the STEP program employment. And for your awareness, in case you aren't aware of it, STEP program stands for Skills, Training, and Educational Program. This is a program for food and nutrition service recipients that provides free education through AB Tech. And so we want to try to focus on employment outside of that program after they go through that program. And the third is increasing customers who connect to employment information through county services. Specifically, I think the library staff is reporting this and is currently a hub for that information. Any questions?
I like all 3 of these, and I love that the library is tracking this data and using that resource, community resource.
So on the first one, so all of these goals are going to be further fleshed out, right? Okay. So this is just like the headline, and then there'll be okay. I don't know. So maybe as it's fleshed out, maybe my concern would be addressed. But I don't recall seeing this seeing this data or asking this question before. But I would assume that most projects that qualify for EDC incentives probably do provide health care, right? Like
most do. I believe that the motivation behind this goal was to include those extra benefits like childcare, transit, with healthcare being the floor to ensure to access the incentive.
well, that would That would be my, yeah, so that's my only concern is that just reading it like this, it's like, wait, we're giving taxpayer money for jobs that don't provide any health care, right? So I think just the way it's phrased, that's the way I read it first. So I would maybe just think about phrasing it to make clear like that should be like, required. And then we're looking for these other things that aren't as common.
That's helpful.
On the second one, should we include something about not just gaining employment, but looking at an income level as well? I mean, gaining employment at $8 an hour is very different than employment at $20 an hour.
So real quick on that, in the current strategic plan, we have a goal for the STEP program that is around the income level of the folks who complete it. What we found through the process of tracking this is that the cohorts of folks that go through that program, the jobs are being trained for varies. So setting a target for that is somewhat difficult by the fact that they may be going through something different than the previous cohort was, and those pay scales fluctuate. That would be the only point I would point out with that. However, that doesn't mean we can't find a way around that as well. This one's more focused on completion rate.
Okay. I need to think through that.
And I assume the thought was that we could have more of an impact by focusing on employment versus just the pay range.
I was thinking it was a both and, employment
Okay.
and pay.
Any other thoughts or questions? All right, color paddles. What
And
are you
as we
thinking?
finish going through all this, I mean, I don't have any other quibbles with any of these. If there's stuff that we feel like is just missing though, like, are we gonna come back around to that?
If you, what are you thinking, Avril?
Say it now.
Yes, if there's something missing, I'd love to know it now.
Okay.
A concern I have is, when I look at what we've done so far, where did this information come from? Or who did it come from? Was it groups?
Yes, it was staff within the county, taking the priorities that you all provided and trying to, remember where we landed the last time we were together was mostly on the objectives. And so trying to figure out how could we show at the end of 5 years that we had moved the needle on those objectives, and we have a source that will measure it and show that we truly have done what we said we were going to do. So some of it is making sure that we have the data source, that we have the means to influence the goals, and then looking to subject matter experts within the county to help us rephrase that.
I want to make sure that the people who are at the bottom rung, that we're really looking out for them in this information. Because, when I look at it and I put on my hat who I am, I'm concerned about it. I think we've got to do a better job of getting down of the people who look like me. Let's just point it out and be honest about it. Because I'm so concerned that we're going to come up with a 5-year plan that's going to leave out a lot of the people who need it most.
And I think you may see some of that in the third objective within economic development. And the second one that focuses on quality internet, making sure that we're tackling the underserved and unserved regarding internet connectivity and cell phone usage. But then the third one, we start to get into increasing economic opportunities within the county. But if we get through all of these and you still feel that something's missing, please do
Well, don't
let me
worry.
know.
I'll assure you that.
One thing I would like to note, I was the facilitator for this group. We wanted to keep in mind the opportunity to be able to identify demographics for anything that we measure. And the STEP participants is something that we can report demographics on, and we can therefore build initiatives around addressing demographic gaps in that program. We also, from
this board's request, from the last time that we met in June, we sent out an additional survey to get response from local workforce, so employees, employers, workforce organizations. We got some responses from them that pretty well reflect the general feeling of around these objectives and goals. So we didn't really find anything that suggested there wasn't something that we weren't addressing from the business community. I believe you may have received a handout with some additional data that we got from that survey. But we definitely used survey data, your vision, as well for how to go about crafting these goals and objectives. But we can't include anything that we can't really measure. So we want to make sure that we can measure things and include demographics as much as possible too.
Thank you, James.
So there's more economic development stuff to come? Okay.
There are 2 more objectives. So I'll move through those 2 and then take a pause and ask you all if that satisfies what you're thinking.
So I can say on the STEP program, like 92% of the participants are women, and 60% tend to be persons of color. So maybe looking at some engagement around increasing that percentage could be a potential as well.
What program?
The STEP program.
So increasing specific demographics, potentially, okay. Great, thank you. So the second objective I mentioned is around increasing access to quality internet. There are 3 goals here. The first one is around decreasing the unserved or underserved households and ensuring they get high-speed internet. Second goal is around increasing county cell coverage. And the third one is around decreasing the county digital divide index. And that digital divide index is related to infrastructure and socioeconomic factors. Questions here?
And just, can you explain that digital divide index? Can you give some more specific information on that?
So it's an index that's published by Purdue University on an annual basis. It looks at a county's socioeconomic factors. It also looks at things like high-speed internet coverage, cell coverage, as well as access to technology to use high-speed internet and cell data. I can't really explain the formula specifically, but to give an example, it's a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being a very good digital divide index, with 100 being the worst. Some counties in North Carolina have a 5. We're currently at about a 20. So that would be up to this board to determine what would be the goal. We're not determining that today, but what would be the target for us to try to get to in terms of that index?
Just kind of a heat map.
Yes.
And does the heat map go within the county boundaries to where it kind of shows you area to area within a county, or is it?
Yes, you can look at census tracts, and you can look at the county as a whole.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
So I'll move us along to the third objective. Oh, thank you. I figured I'll take a.
Nobody else did. I did.
I'll get a pulse check on all of economic development, since there are some questions. So third objective here that I mentioned is around increasing economic and business opportunities within the county. There are 4 goals. First goal is around increasing average wage in target industries. This is selected as professional and IT, advanced manufacturing, and small businesses. The second goal is around increasing the average wage for the county's economic development investment program projects. So that's increasing average wage. This third one is around increasing the average entry-level wage to ensure that it meets the living wage for the county for those program projects. And then the fourth is around increasing BIPOC small businesses. So focusing on businesses that are owned by Black, Indigenous people of color, and have 25 employees or less.
I think we're on the right track. I'd like to add, just thinking about, and I don't know if this would be a specific goal, but just something for us to think about, how we continue to make Buncombe County more small business friendly. That's part of what I hear back from the community, just kind of across the board with various processes, is how can we support our small businesses and make it easier for people to start those small businesses.
Thank you. And I assume that's the work that, if you all were to want to move forward with this goal, that's the initiatives and the projects that we put in place to make sure that we're successful. So how are we going to reach out and attract and support, et cetera?
All small businesses, not the bottom one, but more broadly.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's great as well, but I'm talking about broadly also.
Okay. So I just went through the 3 objectives around economic development. Again, the first one was around the opportunities and support for local workforce. Second one was around quality internet, and this one is around economic and business opportunities. How are you all feeling? And Commissioner Whitesides, does this address your concerns, or do you still feel like something's missing?
Well, I looked at the 4th dot there. Maybe when we get down in the weeds, we need to talk about it more, because one of the problems I see with the small businesses, we're not giving these people the support that they need. And as a result of that, let's face it, we don't have any in Buncombe County, because what they are saying of businesses are not. And I can tell you that from 40 years of banking. We've got a lot of work to do there. But one of the things is we've got to train these people and work together to make sure. You know, you just can't throw out a business and just say, I'm going to do it. Or people need to understand, you don't open nonprofit organizations to make money. And that's something else too. I see a lot of people doing that in that area, and that's not, you know, I was in banking 40 years. I never saw anybody get rich running nonprofits. So we need to just do a better job of, you know, give the people the support that they need. And even some of these lending organizations now, the default rate is beginning to jump up. And one of the reasons for that is we're not doing a good job of supporting these people. We're not.
One thing I would note about that goal, Commissioner Whitesides, is the group that I worked with to help bring this as part of the plan, this came from one of the Reparation Commission's recommendations to increase data availability that we have, increasing our data collection around BIPOC businesses in Buncombe County. This isn't a data piece, this isn't a data set that exists right now. We would have to, as a county, go out and create the data set and capture that and understand what is the current number of BIPOC-owned businesses, and then be able to measure that over time. So that would be something that we as an organization would have to take on, is to collect and create that data set.
So just to make sure I'm reading this right, when we say the Buncombe County Economic Development Investment Program, that means projects that qualify for our Economic Development Incentives Program and get some kind of agreement to get grants from the county, right? Okay. I mean, I'm not against any of that. It is such a small percentage of like what's happening in the economy, though. I know it is a part that we sort of feel like we're touching by providing these economic development incentives, but it is, you know, the reality is the vast majority of businesses, including new businesses that start in the community, never get any of these, don't qualify for them. It's really kind of like a manufacturing incentive program primarily, which is fine. But I don't know, we are putting a lot of our dots on things that are ultimately pretty niche-y, like in the economy that people live in, right? So, I don't know, I mean, it's just an observation, right?
Do you think it'd be worth creating an economy-wide?
I don't know, I'm just wondering if we should have some other things that affect more, of our constituents' lives.
We could certainly take that back to the group and ask them to consider it.
One of our guiding principles was around stuff that we can control or we can impact and influence.
So help me understand how we can affect increasing the average wage in target industries that we don't control. How those wages are set. What would we do to see that goal come to fruition?
James may have some thoughts on that one. How could we impact average wage in target industries?
I believe that's a very good question. I would like to defer to the gentleman just might better be able to answer that than myself.
Great question. A really tough part, how do you influence businesses to make better decisions on wages?
Right.
And so we do that in a few ways, just the straight up recruitment process and targeting industries that have greater mobility in wage. You'll hear me joke like we're never going to recruit like a coat hanger manufacturer family or facility here just because the wages are so low. However, we will try to pursue, aerospace engineering as an example. Other ways that we do that are through, supporting infrastructure development that enables, places like Enka Commerce Park to come out of the ground where you can kind of see that development. And then additionally, some of our workforce development programs that kind of got buried in this, where we partner with organizations like the Chamber, as an example, to help link folks to jobs in high wage industries, whereas they may not have been prior. So there's a lot of ways that we do that. It doesn't come through in these goals because we're trying to be kind of neat, but they would show up in kind of our business plans, which are the next level of discussion. One other point that I would mention to Commissioner Whiteside's point about, small businesses, and we spent a lot of time talking about the pipeline for small businesses, and a big part of a small business being successful is, being able to be a successful business with customers, but grow over time and scale. And so we talked a little bit about the role of the county, and you'll see that maybe in our foundational elements, the county as an entity that procures goods and services, and what's the role of the county as it pertains to small businesses, BIPOC businesses, and the like. So I think there's a lot to the story, and I just wanted to piece that together.
Thank you, Tim.
I don't have a specific goal here, but just one other thought. I brought this up in the earlier meeting, so maybe it didn't have critical mass, but the one other just area I feel like in the economic development space that we ought to be thinking about, right? And maybe we just need some more community engagement to kind of then think about what specific goals might make sense for us. But I would just encourage us to think about having greater engagement with organizations in our community that represent workers' interests, right? I think when we just think about traditional economic development, it's through this lens of how do we bring good paying jobs to the community, right? How do we recruit those key sectors here? How do we work with our friends at the Chamber of Commerce, right? I think these are kind of the traditional things we do, right? We start a loan program to help people start businesses, but I think that there is just a real change going on, at a broad level in our country around interest in how do we support workers to be more effective advocates for themselves in their workplace, right? There's more support now for unions as having a beneficial role in the economy than there has been in 50 years in our country, right? It's 77%. It's people who don't agree on anything else think this is a good thing. And there's a lot more activity happening organically in our community around kind of workers being interested in being engaged in like workers associations, right? So I don't have a specific goal, but I just think we should think about, like, as part of our economic development planning to, to kind of consciously have more engagement with the groups that are in our community that are sort of thinking about these issues. And then, by having more engagement, like some specific goals for like, well, what could the county do to be supportive? Like might come out of that. And I think that there is also some like very solid, data to back up the idea that in communities where you have a more organized and engaged workforce, right? That like wages are higher, right? Like if you just kind of look at like tourism economies across the country and look at like what service sector workers get paid, like the communities that do have more organized like workforce, like where workers have a higher percentage of participation in unions, wages and benefits are like absolutely higher, right? And not just for the employees who happen to belong to the unions, but they raise wages for whole sectors, right? So I don't have a specific goal in mind, but I would encourage us to think about like, well, how do we engage with groups in our community that are working in that space to think about like what's an appropriate role for county government to have to be supportive of workers, in addition to businesses and these other pieces that we traditionally work on.
Okay.
Yep.
That's helpful. Thank you. Any other thoughts? I see a green paddle. If only they had numbers. You were voting with money. Thank you. I will move us forward to education. Okay, thank you. Raphael is handing out copies of the slide deck so you can see what's coming and follow along. So in education, we have two objectives. The first objective is to enhance early and adult learning with 3 goals. The first goal is a focus on increasing children aged 0 to 5 in childcare. Second goal is around decreasing youth ages 16 to 24 who are disconnected from school or work. And the third goal is around increasing adult-focused programs. So again, this one's focused on enhancing early and adult learning.
I wonder under the first one if we could sort of add a STEM to it around pre-K specifically. Early childhood our committee had a really good discussion during our meeting today that included, thanks to county staff, a real deep dive at looking at community level data over the last 5 and in some cases more years, and showing that, well, great work's underway. We have some really important and heavy lifts to do both in the 0 to 5 enrollment category and then specifically in the pre-K enrollment, although our numbers are stronger under pre-K enrollment. So anyway, it might just be helpful to parse that out to stay aligned with the work the EC committee is trying to support. And then I think I just had under both 2 and 3, I wonder if the language could be a little more specific in 2, like what disconnected means, and then in 3, yeah, like what disconnected from school or work means, if that.
That's a official federal designation. It's also be called opportunity youth, if that's more familiar.
Okay.
And it's that age group 16 to 24, which is kind of a weird demographic that overlaps school-age folks and folks moving into the workforce. And these are the folks that are not doing either of those things that fall in that group.
Okay.
You may remember a little over a year ago, there was a presentation from NC League Director Jeff DeBellis here, and one of the things he brought up was opportunity youth as a new horizon in terms of county kind of speaking to certain elements of the workforce that were not engaged.
Yeah.
And at the time, our rate was within that cohort around 11.2% of folks fell into that category, which was up from the previous measurement in 2016. So it last time I looked at the data, I think maybe it dropped down a touch, but not a lot. So that's what that's
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
My future in I'm sorry, Jasmine. was just gonna say, very quickly, my Future to NC did some real deep dives into this in early 2020, and I know they've been engaged. I was on the initial task force for that, so it could be a really good opportunity.
Yes, we'll be using that as a data.
That's the
To work
data
within-
source, yes.
And you had some.
I'm so sorry, Jasmine.
Oh, not at all. It might be that your answer is exactly the same, that adult-focused programs is recognized terminology.
Well, no, honestly,
Oh,
that one is
okay.
a little more broad.
Okay.
So, you'll see with this, we're looking in K-12, right? So there's early students, it's pre-K stuff, and then there's adult learning pieces. So that's where the focus is. For instance, the adult literacy rate, last published by North Carolina National Association of Literacy, was 1 in 10 Buncombe County residents do not read at textbook increases by 10%. So that's kind of the genesis of where this came from. That's not saying that that is the sum total of what's going to this goal, but it may be one of the initiatives that fall under that, improving that rate.
Thank you. Any other questions on this one? Brownie says, go forward. Wonderful. Thank you. So the second objective within the education focus group is to holistically improve equity in education. There are 3 goals here. The first goal is around reducing disparities in court referrals for BIPOC youth. The second goal is to reduce disparities in kindergarten readiness by race and ethnicity. And the third goal is to reduce disparities in public school graduation rates.
So I'm gonna ask a question I asked earlier. How does Buncombe County Commission and Buncombe County government address public school graduation gaps? I feel like we discussed that in one of our sessions, is really focusing on the educational components that we can affect the change on. And while this is an incredible goal and we should all be thinking about it, I just worry about us putting our fingers into the K-12 curriculum and how they do their jobs.
Want to speak to it?
Yeah. So I'll say from the perspective, what we were trying to do is look at what we could influence, and we felt that, the court referrals with the school resource officers, we felt we had some influence there. With the kindergarten readiness and the work of the Early Childhood Education Committee, we had some influence there. I think with the third one, part of it was, providing you all with that option to look at that and say, do you all want to see yourselves from a funder perspective having some ability to influence that or not? So we wanted to provide that option to you all and make sure we didn't miss that opportunity for you all to have that conversation and make a decision around, is that something you wanted to look to? Because that was a conversation you all did have on June 6th, so we wanted to make sure that we were responsive to that.
So with that third one, then if we proceeded with it, it'd be looking at programs that we support that would help with that.
That could potentially be youth-involved programs, after-school programs. I think we might need to be more specific in that language.
And I think there are some school programs that we support too that do help specifically with this.
Yeah.
There's the Career Academy that we support, and I think there might be one or two.
I don't know we've had the data to look at that, but we would want to make sure we can pull that data to make sure it is
That's a great
effective, and it is something we want to replicate or change.
That's a great point.
And just,
How do we look at the kids, when you look at 2 and 3, but between 2 and 3, how do you look at the kids who are in that gap? Who are not, they're lost. That's why we have, when you look at the city, well, both school systems, when you look, you're going to see the racial gap. It's there. But my concern is, how do we look? Do we throw those kids away? What are we going to do for them? And they don't make it to public graduation, a lot of them. we lose them. But what can we do in there to curb that? Or how can we help?
Yeah, that's a good question.
If we're being successful, right, with number 3, isn't that addressing that concern, Commissioner Whitesides?
No, but what do you do between that? You know, you just can't throw them in if they're already, if they're law. If you got kids who get to the 9th grade and can't read at that level, how are they gonna graduate? What are we gonna do in between? That's where I'm coming from.
I hear what you're saying, and I think that also addresses the question that I was asking, what can we influence to get them to graduation? And I'm wondering if it is those increasing after-school opportunities for educational enrichment, the tutoring that they need. I might be wrong, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Commissioner Whitesides.
Yeah, because I know we got that, but it's not working.
Right.
I mean.
So looking at
Yeah, but
what is out there
can
that
we
works,
do?
yeah.
You know, because we're losing a lot of kids.
But this is just the headline there, right?
Oh,
So
yeah,
like what the,
yeah.
that's the right questions. So like the more detailed plan is gonna be
Yeah.
the list of
Specifics.
actions that are being undertaken now and which should be evaluated for, like, are they actually effective? And then, you know, are there new ideas for things that we need to be doing to achieve the goal, right? Because, yeah, it's a great headline, but like, how do you get there?
Yeah.
We want to get into the weeds today.
Uh,
So we want to get in the weeds today.
But we could certainly take this feedback to the work group and ask if, you know, are there data sources? How can we impact somewhere between the K and graduation? Like,
Right.
what influence do we have and how can we measure that?
And I'm curious why you added in holistically, because to me, it's a stronger statement, just saying improve equity in education. So I'm curious why you added that descriptor, because on most of the other ones, you don't have some descriptive word prior.
Good question.
The intention of that, oh, I'm sorry, Mike, sorry. The intention of that was to speak to different approaches. So this is about getting ready for school. This is about making sure folks get out of school. And this is about making sure that we're not contributing to a school to prison pipeline. Right. So it was about taking this multi-pronged approach. That said, it is wordsmithing. We can take that word off if it makes a better statement just to say improve equity in education.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, are you good to move forward? Wonderful, thank you. All right, so the next focus area, we have 2 more focus areas. This next one is around community health. So if you recall, in June, when I came to you all, health and safety were lumped together, and we discussed it and decided to break them apart. So here's really your first look at what community health looks like standing alone as a focus area. There are 3 objectives in this area. The first objective is around increasing coordination and resilience of community health services to create a healthier and safer community. There are 3 goals here. The first goal is around the connections and referrals among health and service providers, so trying to increase that connectivity. The second goal is around increasing foster care coordination for that 18 to 21, a very specific age group there. And the third goal is around decreasing community members over 65 with reported independent living difficulty. Living difficulty.
Yeah. Like finding a place to live, or how broad of a adjective is that?
It's a data source from the U.S. Census that they update every year. So it's individuals over 65 who report that on their own they have difficulty living without assistance. So it's a gauge of kind of how many people in the community need support. with living as the age in place.
And it's a defined term. It's a specifically defined term.
Yeah, from the Census Bureau.
I wonder if, you all have maybe already thought about how to handle this, but as these become more public facing, if things that are these official terms can have some clarification or something around that, just for ease of access.
They will. I believe our plan is to create a definition or a more information section.
Just put them in red for us so we know, you know what it means, even if we don't.
Good feedback, thank you.
Because I think it's gonna be a good list of things that people will support in the public, they just don't know what it means. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this one?
Good.
That's a good one.
Wonderful, thank you. The second objective within community health is to increase equitable outcomes in physical, mental, and behavioral health, and to increase social connectedness. 3 goals here. The first goal is around decreasing infant mortality disparity ratio, the infant mortality disparity ratio. The second goal is around decreasing the necessity of ED visits for suicidal ideation. This is related to or along the lines of the availability of mental health services in the community. And the third goal is around in-person recreation and wellness programs, so to increase the participation, getting to that physical, mental, behavioral, and connectedness in the community.
Did you say on the second one that the sort of unspoken part of that is increase community-based resources around behavioral and mental health and therefore decrease the necessity of ED visits? Is that what the?
That is my understanding, yes.
The intention was to try and prevent a crisis and to have earlier intervention, so we don't get to that point.
Right. Gotcha. I don't want to get in the weeds. So this would be under, so then under this, we would see the, here's how we'll increase. Okay.
Oh, very good.
Feeling good on this one? Okay. Good. Oh, great.
I think it's
And then that brings us to the third objective under community health, to increase community well-being by providing person-centered, trauma-informed services. So what this looks like with these 4 goals is to increase trauma-informed services that are provided to the community, to decrease the racial disparity ratio of children entering the foster care system during investigation. So that's very specific around the investigation period. Third goal is around decreasing the number of substance use related deaths, decreasing, not eliminating. And then the fourth is decreasing non-critical EMS responses related to chronic diseases in patients over 65. How are y'all feeling on this one?
Just a question. So with, in the objective up there with the trauma-informed services, I was just wondering the reason for putting that specifically in the objective, because all of them seemed as if they related directly to that until we got to number 4, but maybe I'm missing something.
That's a good question. I can take that back to the group and ask if that language is necessary. Anything else?
Oh, good.
Okay.
Good.
And that brings us to public safety. 3 objectives here. First is to increase holistic prevention and harm reduction. There are 4 goals. First goal is around decreasing gun violence. Second goal is around reducing racial disparity rates in the jail population. The third goal is around community members trained in risk reduction and preparedness. And then the fourth goal is to reduce the number of pretrial technical violations.
Can you give me an example of the pretrial technical violations?
Had a feeling you'd ask me that question. I think Kathleen will help us.
It's a wide range, but the conditions are typically tied to the conditions of release for any individual case. So it might be something to do with testing positive for an illicit substance in a urinalysis, leaving the community if that was restricted. It would really just be dependent on the individual conditions of release set forth in the pretrial conditions.
And my understanding is that by reducing those technical violations for conditions of release, it can, that can reduce or avoid recidivism in the jails, and it prevents people from going back through the system for like the small minor issues.
Okay, and you know I'm gonna say the same thing about holistic again. It just sounds stronger to me. Increase prevention and harm reduction.
Got it. Anything else?
Real good.
Okay. It's a lot to go through. The second objective is to enhance public safety. 4 goals here. First one is around improving emergency response times. Second goal is around increasing the acreage of flood-prone areas that are preserved in marginalized communities. Third is to increase the integrated preparedness drills and exercises that are conducted in the community. And the fourth is to improve protective services cases that are initiated on time.
How are we gonna define the word reserved in bullet number 2? As in excluded from development, or?
Yeah, I believe that's it would look potentially like conservation easements.
The intent being to exclude development of any kind occurring on a lot or a parcel, something like that. Okay.
Correct, and the more description that I have is that this goal seeks to reduce flooding and increase disaster resilience among community members living in those flood-prone areas in marginalized communities specifically.
And do we have a baseline on number 4?
For protective services cases initiated on time, I'm pretty sure we do. I'm looking to Mr. Baker. We have a baseline for number 4.
Yes.
Lee. That's great. Thank you.
And number 3 is, and I missed the pre-work because I was out, so this might have gotten covered, but is that intended to include also sort of some resource, like resiliency resources that might be housed in the community? I remember we talked about having like community centers that would be like emergency centers.
Yes.
So is that?
And doing those drills so that.
Okay, I just wonder if maybe we could add
Include that.
something around, because that just, something to drills and exercises to include concrete resources.
So, more about, because I thought this was getting to actually doing some exercises with the community.
Right, I just recall us having conversations about investing resources and equipping kind of resiliency hubs.
Yeah,
Yeah. and I-
Generators and all
that
that.
was in the budget, yeah.
Yeah, so I just, it feels like running drills is great, tabletops drills, et cetera, really important, but also having permanent resources that exist is different than drilling. So I just want to see if we could have language that could allow for,
Creating those
Building,
hubs.
Creating
building the
hubs.
stuff, infrastructure.
yeah,
Okay.
infrastructure, thank you.
Yeah.
And And one thing, just, because you're specifically talking kind of about those community center hubs and, right, the generators and everything was gonna be in the school. So I just wanna make sure those were actually kind of two different conversations.
Yes, we weren't putting generators and stuff at the community centers, They were mostly,
Oh,
yes.
yeah, I just mean that if this is the umbrella language, it would include not just running the drills, but the
Building
investments in infrastructure and capital that we need.
Got it. Good to move forward. Thank you. Second, where am I here? Public safety. Oh, this is the third objective. To advance collaboration and coordination of individualized diversion services. So we have 4 goals here. The first one is to increase individuals seen by alternate emergency responder services. Second is to decrease people repeatedly assigned to pretrial and/or diversion services. Third goal is to decrease the number of charges for class 2 and 3 misdemeanors. And the fourth is to increase feelings of safety for domestic violence and sexual violence survivors. And so when we talk about alternate emergency responder services, I'll elaborate on that one. It would include, but is not limited to, community paramedics and the sheriff's office co-responder unit. The services seek to divert individuals in need of behavioral health support away from criminal detention and/or hospitalization towards sustainable care.
And is there a way that we know we can track number 4?
What was that?
That we can track, do we know there's a way we're gonna track number 4?
Number 4, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Wells is good to move forward. Ferrara. All right, thank you. All right, and this is our last focus area, last but not least, around energy and environment. There are 3 objectives for this focus area as well. The first objective is to preserve the agricultural heritage of Buncombe County and prioritize the protection of natural resources. There are 4 goals that you see here. The first one is around increasing economic viability and stability of the agricultural support provided to farmers through workshops, business planning, et cetera. The second goal is around recycling waste generated in Buncombe County. To include, it says C&D, that's construction and demolition. The third goal is to restore X% of linear feet of stream bank restoration. And the fourth is to initiate conservation of total acreage in the county. And I will note, you see this star on that fourth one, that is a board-adopted goal that's currently outside of the strategic plan. So we would move that into the strategic plan.
And is there a plan to update that, because with that goal, because we're there with what was
And that will be
originally.
a part of this process.
Okay,
Yeah, that's the August 22nd discussion.
okay.
Where we'll
thanks.
talk through, yes, targets and numbers.
So I like number 2. I think it's getting at kind of C&D recycling waste, which is a high volume form of waste to preserve the landfill, which is super important. I guess I'm wondering if there could be, or why there might not be a goal around reducing methane or composting related solid waste goal of some kind. In the future slides, okay. I'll wait patiently.
You know civil wasn't gonna let us forget compost.
Any other questions on this?
You did mention methane though, was that?
The compost bill.
That's, yeah, kind of the same.
Yes, same.
Connected. All right. I'll move us forward. Second objective is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and protect air quality. 4 goals here. First one is that X% of county vehicles will be zero emission by 2030. Second goal is around residential solar installations through programming, et cetera. Third goal is to offset X tons of organic compost from the landfill. That satisfies your question, Commissioner Sloan. And the fourth goal is around renewable energy usage for county operations. That one is also a board adopted goal that sits outside of the strategic plan right now.
So these are all great goals. Like the one thing I would speak up for to encourage consideration of would be, and I definitely believe like on the county vehicles, like that's where we lead by example. There's gonna be lots of great, electric vehicle options for county fleet consideration in the coming years as more and more different models come into the market. When I think about like what can the county do, like in the larger community goals, right? We're just like in all these other spaces, like we have limited tools to affect like what's happening, in everyone else's, activities. But I think that, and I'm certainly like the Solarize campaign we did a few years ago with partners was great, and I think doing another one was, it sounds like a great idea at some point. I think one of the biggest opportunities for us to potentially make a difference is around like increasing the adoption of utilization of electric vehicles in the community, right? So, because this is the space where just there's this rapid transformation going on in terms of like what technologies are available, where it's gone from being this niche of like, if you're really wealthy and you're totally eco-committed, like a few years ago, like you could buy like an expensive car that would, meet your needs. But now all of a sudden, like it's something that's everyone, there's gonna be like affordable, really high quality options for everyone. And, but there are still a lot of barriers to why people, when they're, and the other thing is that like while most people would love to have solar on your house, there's lots of reasons why people can't have solar on their house, because there's big trees or they live in apartments, stuff like that. Like, so definitely good to promote, but again, but almost everyone in our community, like if you're of working age, most people have to have a car, right? And cars wear out, so you have to, people buy cars, right? So like over the next 5 years, like a huge percentage of our community will be making a decision, right, on buying some kind of new vehicle. So do we have a role to actually make it more viable for people to say, I would like to buy an electric car, but maybe you live in apartments and you can't have a charger at your house. So anyway, this is a long way of saying, I think the county should think more about like what we can do to make it viable for people to adopt electric EV, increase the adoption rate of EVs in the community. I think it's probably the place where, in terms of community impact on climate footprint, we can probably potentially make a bigger difference than anywhere else. So.
Okay.
I would imagine that this might exist, but if not, it will soon. Some sort of heat map that, like we were talking about earlier, that would kind of show a community's access to EV charging based on the census tract, like what quantity of EV chargers they have.
It's incredibly limited, right? Like the public charging we have in the community right now, like you go there and you have to wait. Well, it's like, unless you're totally into it, like a lot of people would not rationally do this, right? So accessible public charging, and also when you go to these public charging places, like you pay like 50 cents a kilowatt hour for it, right? So like, if there was like affordable, accessible electric vehicle charging in Buncombe County, there would it would meaningfully, like more people would be like, yeah, I'll choose to buy an EV because I know I can charge and I know it's, not that expensive to do it and I don't have to wait in line. So.
Okay.
My only other thought on this slide, number 2, there's currently Electrify Asheville Buncombe, which is a program we're participating in. It doesn't really have anything to do with solar, but rather decarbonization of buildings. And so I guess I don't want, maybe make it broader. I don't want us to not take credit for or continue that program. Maybe we do that 3 more times. I don't know. To include that, incorporate that as well.
Great. I'll take all this feedback back to the group. And we have one more objective. Are you all good to move forward? So this last objective for energy environment is to increase hazard mitigation and disaster preparedness to support a climate resilient community. There are 3 goals here. The first goal is focused on becoming or meeting the requirements to become a community rating system class 8 community. That, my understanding is that impacts flood insurance rates for the community. Second goal is to increase stream gauges in an effort to improve our ability to protect the community from flooding. And the third is to develop or conduct annual hazard-specific awareness campaigns. Any concerns or questions or thoughts on these? Everyone's good? So you still processing?
I'd be interested if there's anything on there, if the staff have any ideas around drought preparedness.
Okay. All right. I can take that back to him. Thank you. So that is all I have as of right now, as if it wasn't enough, but a lot around the strategic plan. The immediate next steps are that I will take all this feedback to those focus area work groups within the county, and I will be back with you all on the 22nd of this month to really start doing some more deep diving into the numbers. So, 30%, 50%, what are the right targets? And we'll bring you a menu of options to talk through. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Great job on all the work to put this together. Hey, I think we're going to need a few minutes before we start the regular meeting. So maybe are we staying here? Okay. All right. Well, so maybe, can we plan on starting at like 5:15? There's just a couple of, I think we just need a minute. Great.